The morning started like any other aboard the diplomatic station. Ambassador Claire Whitman sat in her small office, drinking her third cup of coffee while reading through the usual reports. Trade agreements, minor disputes between species, requests for meetings. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Then the priority message arrived. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the seal of the Galactic Confederation. Claire set down her coffee and leaned forward. Priority messages from the Confederation never brought good news. The message was short and direct. The 12 most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy had formed a united front. They accused humanity of illegal expansion into restricted space. They demanded immediate withdrawal from all colonies in the Kepler expanse. They gave humanity 30 standard cycles to comply. The final line made Claire read it twice. Failure to comply would result in military action. The combined fleets of the Confederation would treat any human presence in the disputed region as an act of war. Claire sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then she finished her coffee. Her aide, Danny Marsh, burst through the door moments later. He was young, barely 25, and had only been assigned to the diplomatic corps for 6 months. His face was pale and his hands were shaking as he held his data tablet. "Ambassador, have you seen the message? The Confederation is threatening war. Actual war. Against all of humanity." Claire nodded calmly. "I saw it. What do we do? Should I contact Earth Command?" "The Colonial Defense Force. The President. Earth Command already knows. They received the same message we did. As for what we do our jobs. We're diplomats, Danny. This is exactly the situation we're trained for." Danny looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Ambassador, with all respect, they're talking about destroying our colonies. Millions of people live in the Kepler expanse. Families, children, entire communities that have existed for generations. I'm aware of the stakes. Then why are you so calm?" Claire stood up and walked to the window. The diplomatic station orbited a dead moon in neutral space, positioned deliberately far from any species' territory. From here, she could see the distant glow of a nebula, its purple and blue gases swirling in patterns that had existed for millions of years. Somewhere beyond that nebula, humanity's colonies continued their daily lives. Unaware that powerful forces were gathering against them, "Do you know how old the Galactic Confederation is?" Claire asked. Danny checked his tablet. "About 12,000 standard years, according to our records." 12,000 years. In that time, they've absorbed hundreds of species into their collective. Some joined willingly. Others were conquered. They control resources across 3 galactic arms. Their combined military strength is beyond anything humanity could match in direct combat. "That's not making me feel better, Ambassador." Claire turned to face him with a slight smile. "Here's the interesting part. In 12,000 years, the Confederation has issued exactly 47 ultimatums like this one. Threats of total war against species that defied their authority. And how many of those resulted in actual war?" 3. Danny blinked. "Only 3? Out of 47? The Confederation prefers intimidation to action. War is expensive even for them. They've built their power on the threat of force rather than its application. Most species back down when faced with the combined might of 12 civilizations, but 3 didn't." "Correct. And those 3 were completely destroyed. Their worlds burned. Their people scattered or enslaved. The Confederation made examples of them to ensure others would fall in line. So either we surrender our colonies, or we risk becoming the 4th example. That's how they see it." Claire returned to her desk and began typing on her console. "But they've made a calculation error. They've studied our expansion patterns, our trade relationships, our diplomatic history. They've concluded that humanity is a peaceful species that will choose survival over conflict. Aren't we? Peaceful, I mean." Claire paused her typing. "We are now. We've worked very hard to become peaceful, but the Confederation has only known us for 300 years. That's not even a blink of an eye by their standards. They haven't looked deeper into our history." "What do you mean?" "I mean they've seen humanity at its best. They've watched us explore, trade, and cooperate. They've observed our colonies working together, our willingness to negotiate, our preference for diplomatic solutions. They think they understand us. She pulled up a historical file on her console, images flashing across the screen. Ancient battlefields, burned cities, weapons of terrible destruction. The long and bloody story of human civilization laid out in stark detail. They don't understand us at all. A new message arrived, this one from the Confederation Council directly. High Chancellor Vorath, leader of the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, demanded Claire's presence at the Grand Assembly. She was to answer for humanity's crimes against galactic law. She was to explain why the Confederation should not simply wipe humanity from existence. The message was designed to frighten her. The language was harsh, the threats explicit. Any reasonable person would be terrified. Claire read it once, then began composing her response. Danny, please inform Earth Command that I'll be attending the Grand Assembly as requested. Also, have my formal uniform prepared. The blue one with the silver trim. You're actually going? Into the heart of Confederation space. Surrounded by species that want to destroy us. Of course I'm going. That's where the conversation is happening. I can't very well negotiate from here. Danny set down his tablet and took a deep breath. Ambassador, I've studied the Confederation extensively. The Grand Assembly is designed to intimidate visitors. The chamber is massive. The delegates are chosen specifically to make outsiders feel small and insignificant. Every detail is calculated to demonstrate Confederation power. I'm aware. The Velthari alone stand over 3 meters tall. Their crystalline bodies can survive in vacuum. They've conquered more worlds than humanity has explored. I know. The Mordeshans evolved from apex predators. They have claws that can tear through starship hulls. Their empire is built on military conquest. Danny, Kryn Collective shares a hive mind. Billions of individuals thinking as one. They consider individual consciousness a form of insanity. Danny. Claire's voice was firm but kind. I appreciate the briefing. I've read all the same files you have. I know exactly what I'm walking into. Then how can you be so calm? Claire finished her message and sent it. The response to High Chancellor Vorath was simple and direct. She would attend the Grand Assembly. She would speak on behalf of humanity. She looked forward to addressing the Council's concerns. I'm calm because I know something the Confederation doesn't, she said. They think this ultimatum gives them power over us. They think humanity will fold under pressure like every other young species they've threatened. They're wrong. How can you be sure? Claire picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, and set it back down. Because I've read our history, Danny. All of it. The beautiful parts and the terrible parts. I know what humans are capable of when pushed into a corner. She headed for the door, then paused. The Confederation has ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years through fear and intimidation. They've never encountered a species quite like ours. They're about to learn why that matters. Danny watched her go, still not entirely sure whether to feel hopeful or terrified. He suspected the answer was both. The shuttle ride to the Grand Assembly took 4 days. Claire spent most of that time reviewing files, studying the key players she would face, and preparing her arguments. Danny spent most of that time trying not to be sick from nerves. The Confederation capital world was called Nexus Prime. It served as neutral ground for the Alliance. A planet chosen specifically because no single species had a historical claim to it. The world was covered in gleaming towers and massive structures built to accommodate beings of every possible shape and size as their shuttle descended through the atmosphere. Claire watched the city grow larger through the viewport. Millions of ships moved through carefully designated traffic lanes. Orbital stations circled the planet like a ring of artificial moons. The sheer scale of Confederation infrastructure was meant to humble visitors before they even set foot on the surface. They built all of this to send a message, Danny said quietly. They want us to know how small we are. It is impressive, Claire admitted. But remember, Danny, big doesn't always mean strong. The dinosaurs were big too. A delegation met them at the landing platform. Velthri guards stood at attention, their crystalline bodies catching the light of the twin suns. A protocol officer, a small furry creature from a species Claire didn't recognize, guided them through security procedures designed to be as slow and humiliating as possible. Claire submitted to every scan, every inspection, every minor indignity, without complaint. She answered questions politely. She smiled at the guards. She thanked the protocol officer for his thoroughness. By the time they reached the Grand Assembly chamber, word had already spread. The human ambassador was either very confident or very stupid. Either way, the delegates were curious. The chamber itself was beyond anything Danny had imagined. It rose 7th stories high, a vast, circular space designed to hold representatives from over 200 species. Floating platforms carried delegates who couldn't survive in standard gravity. Atmospheric bubbles contained those who breathed different gases. Translation devices hummed constantly, converting hundreds of languages into a unified whole. At the center of everything stood the council podium, where the leaders of the 12 founding species sat in judgment. High Chancellor Voreth occupied the highest seat, his crystalline Velthri form glowing with inner light. To his left sat Commander Sketh of the Mordesian Empire, a massive insectoid creature whose mandibles clicked with barely contained aggression. To his right floated the collective representative of the Kryn, a being that spoke for billions of minds linked as one. Claire walked to the human podium without rushing. She took her time adjusting the microphone, testing the translation systems, arranging her notes. Every second she didn't speak was a second she controlled the room. Finally, High Chancellor Voreth's patience ran out. The human delegation has been summoned to answer serious charges. His voice boomed through the chamber. Your species has violated Confederation territorial boundaries. You have established illegal colonies in restricted space. You have ignored formal warnings and diplomatic communications. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Do you deny these accusations? Claire cleared her throat. Thank you for the opportunity to address this assembly, High Chancellor. Before I respond to your charges, I have a few questions of my own. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was not how these proceedings typically went. Accused species were expected to defend themselves, not ask questions. Questions. Voreth's form flickered with irritation. You stand accused of violating galactic law. You do not get to question us. With great respect, Chancellor, I believe I do. The Confederation Charter, which humanity signed upon first contact with your alliance, guarantees all species the right to understand the charges against them. I'm simply trying to understand. The legal argument was sound. Voreth could not refuse without appearing to violate his own laws. He gestured for her to continue. My first question is simple, Claire said. You claim we established illegal colonies in restricted space. Specifically, the Kepler Expanse. Can you tell me which member species has a prior claim to that region? Silence. Claire waited. The chamber waited. Voreth consulted with his fellow council members through private communication channels. The Kepler Expanse falls within Confederation territory, he finally replied. That is claim enough. But Confederation territory is defined by the Treaty of Founding as regions claimed by member species. I've reviewed the records. No member species has ever claimed the Kepler Expanse. The region was deemed uninhabitable due to radiation storms and asteroid density. When our colonists arrived, they found nothing but dead rocks and empty space. Your colonists entered without permission. Permission from whom? The asteroids? The radiation storms? There was no one there to ask. Commander Sketh slammed his clawed appendage against his podium. You speak with too much arrogance for such a young species. The Mordesian Empire ruled 1,000 worlds when your kind still lived in caves. You do not get to lecture us on territorial rights. Not lecturing anyone, Claire said calmly. I'm asking a simple question. Under your own laws, who owns the Kepler Expanse? The Confederation claims all unclaimed space by default, Voreth said. It is our right as the dominant power in this galaxy.
I see.
So your position is that any space not already claimed by a member species automatically belongs to the Confederation? regardless of who develops it, who lives there, or who makes it habitable? Correct, Claire nodded slowly. And this rule was established when exactly? Another pause. More consultation. The principle has always been understood, but it's not written in the charter. I've read the charter, Chancellor, all 9,000 pages of it. This principle appears nowhere. In fact, Article 7 specifically states that unclaimed territories may be developed by any species willing to accept the risks. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up. Claire stood quietly at her podium, letting the chaos unfold around her. Enough. Voreth's voice cut through the noise. Legal arguments will not save you, human. The Confederation has 47 capital ships assembled at the border of your territory. We have the power to enforce our claims regardless of what any document says. I don't doubt that you have the power, Claire replied. My question is whether you have the right, and I suspect that question matters more than you'd like to admit. Why would it matter? Power makes right. This is the oldest law of the galaxy. Claire smiled. Is it? Tell me, Chancellor, how many species have you threatened with total war? What? It's a simple question. In the 12,000-year history of the Confederation, how many ultimatums like this one have you issued? Voreth hesitated. I don't see how that's relevant. 47, Claire answered for him. 47 times, the Confederation has threatened complete destruction against species that defied you. 3 of those resulted in actual military action. The other 44 times, the threatened species surrendered. You've done your research. I always do my research. Here's what I found interesting, Chancellor. The 3 species you actually destroyed were small, isolated. They had no allies, no resources, nothing to offer the galaxy. Destroying them cost you almost nothing and sent a clear message to everyone else. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. The 44 who surrendered were different. They had trade relationships, resource agreements, strategic positions. Destroying them would have been expensive, so you gave them a way out. You let them keep their dignity while bending to your will. Your point. My point is that this ultimatum isn't about law or territory or justice. It's about sending a message. Humanity is new. We're small. You think destroying us will remind the galaxy who's in charge without costing you anything significant. And what if it is? Then you've made a serious miscalculation. Because we're not like those other species. We don't respond well to threats. Commander Sketh laughed, a harsh clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. Brave words from a creature I could tear apart with my bare claws. Claire looked directly at him. Commander, I have no doubt you could kill me easily. But killing me wouldn't end this conflict. It would just prove that we were right to prepare for war. Prepare for war? You don't have the capability to challenge us, don't we? Claire's voice remained calm. Chancellor, council members, delegates of the Confederation, you've studied humanity for 300 years. You've watched us explore and trade and cooperate. You've concluded that we're a peaceful species. She paused. You're not wrong. We are peaceful. We've chosen to be peaceful. But I wonder if any of you have asked the obvious question. The chamber fell silent. Why do we have to choose? The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Claire let the silence stretch, watching as delegates exchanged confused glances. The translator systems hummed steadily, but no one spoke. Finally, the Kryn collective representative broke the silence. Unlike other species, the Kryn spoke with a strange harmony, as if many voices were combined into one. We do not understand your question, human. All civilized species choose peace eventually. It is the natural progression of intelligent life. War is wasteful. Cooperation is efficient. Your species reached the stars and learned this lesson, as all species do. Claire shook her head slowly. That's where you're wrong. Humanity didn't reach the stars and then learn to be peaceful. We had to become peaceful before we could reach the stars at all. Explain, gladly. Claire pulled up a holographic display from her podium. Numbers and dates filled the air in glowing text. In the last 2,000 years of our recorded history, before we developed faster-than-light travel, humanity engaged in over 15,000 armed conflicts. The number sent murmurs through the chamber. Several delegates checked their own translation systems, certain they had misheard. 15,000 conflicts in 2,000 years, Claire continued. That averages 2 more than 7 wars per year, every year, for 20 centuries. Some lasted days. Some lasted decades. Some killed hundreds. Some killed millions. She changed the display, showing images now. Ancient battles fought with swords and spears, modern warfare with machines and explosives. Cities burning. Refugees fleeing. The endless cycle of human violence laid bare for alien eyes. This is what we were, Claire said. This is what we did to each other. Not to alien species. Not to outside threats. To ourselves. Our own families. Our own neighbors. Our own kind. Commander Sketh's mandibles clicked rapidly. Impossible. No species could sustain such violence and survive. You would have destroyed yourselves long before reaching space. We nearly did. Multiple times, Claire pulled up another display. A mushroom cloud rising over a devastated city. 2 cities, actually, destroyed in seconds by weapons of unimaginable power. We created weapons capable of cracking planets. Not to fight aliens. We didn't know aliens existed. We built them to use on each other. We actually used some of them. Why? The question came from a delegate Claire didn't recognize. A small aquatic creature floating in a water-filled sphere. W? Hi, would any species wage war against itself? Resources, territory, religion, political ideology, ethnic hatred, economic competition. Sometimes, just because we could. Humans have found reasons to kill each other over almost everything imaginable. She paused, letting the horror of that statement sink in. We've fought wars over land and water and food. We've fought wars over ideas and beliefs. We've fought wars over the color of each other's skin. We've fought wars because one group of humans decided another group wasn't really human at all. The Kryn Collective stirred uneasily. This is madness. The defining characteristic of intelligent life is the ability to reason. What you describe is not reason. It is insanity. Not by your standards, perhaps. By ours, it's just history. Every human alive today carries the genetic legacy of ancestors who survived countless conflicts. We're the children of warriors and survivors and killers. It's in our blood. High Chancellor Vorth's crystalline form had dimmed considerably. If what you say is true, how did your species ever achieve peace? How did you stop destroying yourselves? We almost didn't. Claire pulled up images of world leaders, treaties, international organizations. It took generations. Centuries of slow, painful progress. We built systems to prevent war. We created laws and institutions. We developed technology that made cooperation more profitable than conflict. We taught our children that the people they'd never met were still people, and it worked. Eventually, not perfectly, we still struggle with violence, but we learned to control our worst impulses. We channeled our competitive nature into sports, business, scientific achievement. We found ways to fight without killing. When we finally reached the stars, we made a collective decision. The galaxy had enough conflict. We would be peaceful. We would explore, trade, cooperate. We would be the species we wished we had always been. Claire changed the display one final time. Now it showed human colonies spread across the stars, families building homes on distant worlds, scientists studying strange phenomena, children playing under alien suns. This is what we are now. This is what we chose to become. We're proud of what we've built. We don't want to lose it. Then surrender your colonies, Sketh said. Accept Confederation authority. Your species can continue its peaceful existence under our protection. No. The single word echoed through the chamber. Ambassador. Vorth said carefully, you've just explained that your species values peace above all else. Why would you risk war over a few colonies in disputed territory? because surrendering wouldn't bring peace. It would just delay the next conflict. If we give up the Kepler expanse today, you'll demand something else tomorrow. There's always another ultimatum, another territory, another excuse. We've seen this pattern before in our own history. Appeasement doesn't work. It just teaches aggressors that aggression succeeds. You dare call us aggressors? What else should I call a coalition that threatens to destroy an entire species for building homes on empty rocks? The chamber erupted again. Delegates shouted accusations and counter-arguments. Sketh rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the council platform. Even the usually calm Kryn collective was agitated. Their unified voice fragmenting into discordant harmonies. Claire stood quietly through it all, waiting for the noise to die down. "Let me be absolutely clear," she said when the chamber finally grew quiet. "Humanity does not want war. We have worked incredibly hard to move past our violent history. We genuinely hope to never fight another conflict as long as our species exists. But we will if we have to." Claire's voice had changed. The diplomatic politeness was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something older. "Chancellor, you've calculated that humanity is too weak to resist, too peaceful, too young. You've looked at our 300 years of space exploration and concluded that we're soft, harmless, easy to push around." She leaned forward. "Slightly, you've forgotten what we were for. The 10,000 years before that. Ancient history is irrelevant," Sketh said dismissively. "What matters is current military strength. We have ships and weapons. You have trading vessels and research stations. That's what we've shown you. That's the face we chose to present to the galaxy. But those weapons I mentioned earlier, the ones capable of cracking planets, we didn't destroy them. We dismantled the ones we deployed and locked away the blueprints. They're still there, waiting. You're bluffing. Am I? Chancellor, every human learns our history. Every child is taught about the wars we fought and the price we paid for peace. We remember the lessons because we never want to repeat them. But that also means we remember how to fight. The knowledge is there. The capability is there. If you force us back to what we were," she paused, her eyes moving across the assembly, "you won't like what we become." The chamber was silent. For the first time since the proceedings began, the Confederation delegates seemed uncertain. They had expected a frightened young species begging for mercy. They had not expected this. "You're threatening us," Vorth said slowly. "You're actually threatening the Galactic Confederation, oh Chancellor. I'm explaining the consequences of your choices. There's a difference. You can have peace with humanity. We genuinely want that. We'll trade with you, cooperate with you, share knowledge and resources. We'll be the best allies you've ever had." She straightened. "Or you can have war with humanity. And I promise you, by every ghost of every human who ever died and every conflict we've ever fought, you will remember why that was a mistake." The session ended shortly after that. No vote was taken. No decision announced. The delegates needed time to consider what they had heard. As Claire left the chamber, Danny was waiting for her, his face pale but determined. "Ambassador, that was incredible. But were you serious? About all of it?" Claire kept walking toward their shuttle. "Every word. Do we really still have those weapons? Locked away in vaults on the dark side of Luna, along with detailed plans for biological agents, artificial plagues, self-replicating attack drones, and about 100 other things we really hope we never need." Donnie swallowed hard. "That's terrifying, yes," Claire agreed. "It is. That's exactly the point." 2 days passed after Claire's speech to the Grand Assembly. The Confederation Council met in private sessions, debating endlessly about what to do. Reports reached Claire through diplomatic channels. Some council members wanted to proceed with the ultimatum. Others counseled caution. A few suggested investigating the human claims before making any decisions. It was this last group that Claire focused on. She sent a carefully worded invitation to the council, offering them a demonstration. If they truly wanted to understand humanity, she would show them something no outsider had ever seen. The response came within hours. High Chancellor Vorath and a delegation of 12 council representatives would accept her invitation. Commander Sketh insisted on coming as well. His suspicion of human motives is apparently outweighing his contempt for their species. Claire arranged for the demonstration to take place aboard the human vessel Endurance. It was an older ship, a research and exploration craft that had been patrolling the outer reaches for nearly 40 years. Not a warship, not a symbol of military might, just a working vessel with a working crew. Captain Lisa Monroe met the delegation at the docking bay. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray streaking her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She looked more like someone's grandmother than the commander of a starship. "Welcome aboard Endurance," she said warmly. "I apologize for the cramped quarters. We're not used to hosting dignitaries." Sketh had to duck his massive frame to fit through the corridors. The Velthari delegates' crystalline forms scraped against bulkheads designed for human proportions. The Kryn representative barely fit in its atmospheric bubble. None of them seemed comfortable. "You invited us here to show us something," Vorath said. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Follow me," Lisa replied. She led them through the ship, past crew quarters and research labs and engineering sections. The Endurance wasn't impressive by Confederation standards. It was small, old, clearly designed for function rather than aesthetics. The delegates exchanged glances that suggested they weren't sure why they'd bothered coming. Then, Lisa stopped in front of a sealed door. The security system required 3 separate authorization codes to open. Claire entered one. Lisa entered another. The ship's computer provided the third. "What is this place?" Vorath asked. "Call it the Archive of Remembrance," Claire said. "Every human vessel carries one. It's required by law." The door slid open, revealing a large room filled with displays, artifacts, and holographic projectors. The lighting was soft, almost reverent. There was something about the space that felt sacred. "This is our history," Claire continued. "The real history, not the sanitized version we share with outsiders. Everything we were before we learned to be better." The delegation spread out through the room, examining the displays. Ancient weapons lined one wall. Swords, spears, axes, bows, primitive tools designed for one purpose only. The Mordesian delegates seemed almost impressed by the variety of killing implements humans had devised. "These are pre-industrial weapons," Lisa explained. "Before we had machines, we killed each other with these. For thousands of years, this was how humans settled their differences." She moved to the next section. Now the weapons were more sophisticated. Firearms, explosives, chemical agents. The displays included historical footage, battles recorded in grainy images that captured the chaos and horror of industrial warfare. This is what came next. We developed machines and immediately used them to kill each other more efficiently. In a single conflict, we call the Great War, over 20 million humans died. At the time, it was the deadliest event in our history. 20 million. The Kryn Collective's voice was subdued. In one conflict, we thought it would be the last war. We called it the war to end all wars. We were wrong. Lisa moved to another display. The images were sharper, more detailed. Modern cities reduced to rubble, mass graves, concentration camps. The systematic machinery of human cruelty laid bare. The Second World War came 20 years later. This time, 60 million died. Entire peoples were targeted for extinction based on their religion, their ethnicity, their nationality. We invented new ways to kill on industrial scales, assembly lines of death. Commander Sketh stood frozen before an image of a destroyed city. What weapon did this? A single bomb. Called it a nuclear weapon. We developed them near the end of that war. The first one we used on a populated city killed about 80,000 people instantly. Many more died afterward from injuries and radiation. And you used this weapon on your own species. Twice, 2 cities destroyed to end the war faster. We've been living with the consequences ever since. The delegation moved through the archive in silence. They saw the conflicts that followed: proxy wars, civil wars, revolutions, interventions. They saw footage of atrocities and massacres of humans doing unspeakable things to other humans. They saw the weapons grow more powerful, The death tolls climb higher, the justifications grow thinner. Why do you keep all of this? Vorith finally asked. His crystalline form had dimmed to its lowest glow. Why preserve such terrible memories? Because we can never forget, Claire said. If we forget what we're capable of, we might become it again. Every human who serves on a starship walks through this archive before they take their post. Every child learns this history in school. We carry it with us always. She led them to the final section of the archive. Here the displays showed something different. Peace treaties and diplomatic agreements, international organizations and cooperative ventures. The slow, painful process of humanity learning to live with itself. This is the other half of our story, the part we're proud of. For every war, there was eventually peace. For every atrocity, there was someone who said never again and meant it. We built institutions to prevent conflict, created systems to encourage cooperation. We taught ourselves that the person on the other side of the border was still a person. She pointed to an image of Earth seen from space, the blue marble floating in darkness. When we finally saw our world from outside, we understood something important. There were no borders from space. No nations, no factions, no enemies, just one small planet full of people who had spent millennia killing each other over imaginary lines. That was when you chose peace, Vorith said. That was when we finally had the perspective to make the choice. But it wasn't easy. We still struggle with our nature. Violence is in our blood, Chancellor. We've just learned to control it. Lisa stepped forward. Would you like to see our defensive capabilities? Sketh's mandibles clicked eagerly. Yes, show us what you're actually threatening us with. It's not a threat, Lisa said calmly. It's just information. Come with me. She led them to a smaller room connected to the archive. Here, holographic displays showed Earth's orbital space. Thousands of platforms circled the planet in carefully coordinated patterns. Our defensive grid. 4,700 orbital weapons platforms. Each one carries enough firepower to crack an asteroid. They've been dormant for nearly 2 centuries. Dormant. We haven't needed them. There's been no one to fight. But they're maintained, updated, and ready to activate within hours if necessary. She changed the display, showing the distribution of human colonies across known space. Every major colony has similar defenses. It's not as extensive as Earth's, but substantial. We also have reserve fleets stored in hidden locations throughout our territory. Ships designed for war that we hoped would never be used. Why show us this? Vorith asked. Why reveal your defenses to potential enemies? Claire stepped forward. Because you're not our enemies unless you choose to be. We want you to understand what war with humanity would actually cost. Not because we want to fight, but because we want to convince you that fighting isn't worth it. And if we're not convinced, then we'll do what humans have always done when pushed into a corner. We'll fight. We'll fight with every weapon we have and every weapon we can build. We'll fight with the creativity and desperation that our species developed over thousands of years of conflict. We'll make you pay for every system, every planet, every ship. She looked directly at Vorith. Chancellor, the Confederation might win that war. You probably would, honestly. You have more ships, more resources, more experience. But you wouldn't win easily, and you wouldn't win cheaply. The cost in lives and materials would be staggering. Other species would see that you're not invincible. Your careful balance of power would be disrupted. Is that a threat? It's a calculation. You're very good at calculations, Chancellor. So am I. I've done the math. War with humanity would cost you more than the Kepler expanse is worth. Much more. The only question is whether you've reached the same conclusion. The delegation left shortly afterward. They didn't speak much as they returned to their shuttle. Even Commander Sketh seemed subdued, his earlier aggression replaced by something thoughtful. As their shuttle departed, Danny joined Claire at the observation deck. Do you think it worked? I don't know. But at least now they understand what they're dealing with. That's more than they knew before. If they still decide to attack, Claire watched the Confederation shuttle shrink into the distance. Then we'll do exactly what I said we would. We'll fight. We'll make sure they never forget what that costs. The waiting was the hardest part. 3 days passed after the demonstration aboard the Endurance. 3 days of silence from the Confederation Council. 3 days of growing tension throughout human space. Claire spent those days in her office, answering communications from Earth Command, reassuring colonial governors, and coordinating with other diplomatic missions. The uncertainty was taking its toll on everyone. Stock markets fluctuated wildly. Some families began evacuating from the Kepler expanse. Others refused to leave, declaring that they would defend their homes regardless of what happened. On the morning of the fourth day, the summons arrived. The Grand Assembly would reconvene. A vote would be taken. Humanity's fate would be decided. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Word had spread throughout the Confederation about the human ambassador's speech and the strange archive aboard her ship. Delegates from species that had never paid attention to humanity before now filled the observation galleries. Curious to see how this drama would end, Claire walked to the human podium one final time. Danny stood beside her, his nervousness visible but controlled. They had done everything they could. Now they would learn if it was enough. High Chancellor Vorath called the assembly to order. His crystalline form glowed brightly, but there was something different in his posture. Something Claire couldn't quite identify. The Council has deliberated extensively on the matter of human territorial claims, Vorath began. We have reviewed the legal arguments, examined the historical evidence, and considered the strategic implications of various courses of action. He paused, and the chamber held its breath. The Council has concluded that the human colonization of the Kepler expanse does not constitute a violation of Confederation law. Article 7 of the Charter permits the development of unclaimed territories by any willing species. The humans accepted the risks. They made the region habitable. Their claim is legally sound. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Claire felt Danny grab her arm in disbelief, but she kept her expression neutral. This was only the beginning. Furthermore, Vorath continued, the Council has voted to withdraw the ultimatum issued against humanity. The assembled fleet will return to their respective territories. No military action will be taken. Commander Sketh slammed his appendage against his podium. This is outrageous. The Council cannot simply surrender to human threats. We are not surrendering to threats, Vorath replied calmly. We are acknowledging legal reality and acting in the best interests of the Confederation. War is expensive, Commander. Even wars we would likely win. The resources required to conquer and hold human territory would far exceed the value of that territory. This is about more than resources. This is about authority. We let one species defy us, others will follow. Perhaps, or perhaps they will see that the Confederation can be re-so. Ned with that we are capable of acknowledging when we have overreached. Vorath turned to face the broader assembly. The Confederation has maintained power for 12,000 years by being strong, but strength without wisdom is merely brutality. We have been reminded of that today. Sketh stormed out of the chamber, his heavy footsteps echoing off the ancient walls. Several Mordesian delegates followed him, their mandibles clicking in agitation. But most of the assembly remained, and the mood had shifted. What had begun as a confrontation was becoming something else. After the formal session ended, Vorath requested a private meeting with Claire. They met in a small antechamber off the main hall, just the two of them, with no aides or translators. You bluffed, Vorath said without preamble, at least partially. Did I? Your defensive grid hasn't been tested in combat for nearly 2 centuries. Your military infrastructure has been allowed to deteriorate while you focused on exploration and trade. A full Confederation assault would overwhelm your defenses within weeks. Claire smiled slightly. Probably. Then why are you smiling? Because winning the assault wouldn't be your problem. Holding what you conquered would be? How many troops would you need to occupy human space? How many ships to patrol our systems? How long before the resistance began? Sabotage, insurgency, terrorist attacks. We're very good at those things, Chancellor. We've had a lot of practice. Vorath's form flickered. You would make occupation so costly that victory would be meaningless. You would make it hell. Every world, every station, every asteroid. You would never have a moment's peace. Your soldiers would never feel safe. And eventually, after years or decades or centuries, you would leave. We would make you leave. You're very confident about that. I know my species, Chancellor. We're stubborn. We don't give up easily. We've been conquered before in our history. We always fought back eventually, always. Vorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more thoughtful. I looked up your history after your speech in the assembly. What you said was true. All of it. I found records of wars and massacres that defied understanding. Cruelties that seemed impossible for intelligent beings, and yet also remarkable achievements. Acts of courage and sacrifice that were equally incomprehensible. Contain multitudes, Claire said. It's one of our defining characteristics. I also found something else. Your species has a concept called the underdog, the weaker party in a conflict who triumphs against overwhelming odds through determination and cleverness. Your stories celebrate underdogs. Your history is filled with examples of weaker forces defeating stronger ones. We do like those stories. They give us hope. They also make you dangerous. A species that believes it can win against any odds is a species that will never stop fighting. Vorath moved closer, his crystalline form towering over her. Ambassador, I am going to tell you something that I would deny if you ever repeated it. I'm listening. The Confederation was not united in this action. Several member species argued against the ultimatum from the beginning. They felt it was unnecessary, provocative, and potentially catastrophic. I ignored their concerns because I believed humanity would be easily intimidated. And now I believe I was wrong. Not about your military weakness. That assessment was accurate. But about what that weakness means. A strong enemy can be defeated through superior force. A determined enemy cannot. You would have made us fight for every inch of territory, every system, every rock. The cost would have been measured not just in ships and soldiers, but in centuries of ongoing conflict. Blair nodded slowly. So what happens now? Now we try something different. The Confederation has ruled through fear for too long. Perhaps it's time to try cooperation instead. He extended his crystalline appendage in what Claire recognized as the Velthory gesture of formal agreement. I am proposing a new treaty between the Confederation and humanity. Full recognition of your territorial claims, trade agreements, cultural exchange, a seat at the council table. Eventually, it's a significant change from threatening to destroy us. Consider it a learning experience. For both of us. Claire reached out and grasped his appendage. The crystal was cool against her skin, smooth and somehow alive. The human delegation accepts your proposal. We look forward to being your allies rather than your enemies. As do we. Though I suspect some of my colleagues will need time to adjust. He paused. One more question, Ambassador. Everything you showed us in that archive, everything you told us about your species, was any of it exaggerated for effect? No. Every word was true. Then I have one final observation. You spoke of how hard humanity has worked to become peaceful, how you've tried to move beyond your violent past. I believe you are sincere about that. We are. But I also noticed something in your eyes when you spoke about what would happen if we forced you back to war. Something that was almost eager, as if part of you was hoping we would give you a reason. Claire didn't answer immediately. She thought about the question seriously, honestly examining her own feelings. Chancellor, every human carries two wolves inside them. One that wants peace and connection and cooperation. One that wants to fight and conquer and dominate. We spend our whole lives trying to feed the right one. Sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we don't. She released his appendage and stepped back. You were right to be concerned. We genuinely don't want war. But if you had forced one on us, part of us would have embraced it. The wolf that we've been starving for 300 years would have finally been fed. And once that happens, it's very hard to make it hungry again. Vorath absorbed this in silence. Then he made a sound that his translator rendered as something like laughter. You are a fascinating species, Ambassador. Terrifying, but fascinating. I think the galaxy will be much more interesting with you in it. I'll take that as a compliment. The shuttle ride back to the diplomatic station was quiet. Danny sat across from Claire, processing everything that had happened. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, human colonies would receive word that the crisis was over. Families would celebrate. Children would play under alien suns without fear. Ambassador Danny finally said, "Do you think they'll really leave us alone now?" Claire considered the question. For now. They've learned that threatening us doesn't work. They'll try other approaches. Trade, diplomacy, maybe even genuine friendship. We'll have to stay alert, and if they forget the lesson? If some future chancellor decides humanity looks weak again? Claire looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond this shuttle, beyond this system, beyond the borders of known space, humanity continued to grow. To explore, to build. To become something new, while carrying the weight of everything they had been. Then we'll remind them, she said. That's all we can do. We'll show them who we are, over and over again, until they understand. Humanity isn't weak because we chose peace. We chose peace because we know exactly how strong we can be when we don't. Danny nodded slowly. That's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it. Yes, Claire smiled. That's the point. The shuttle continued on through the darkness, carrying them home. Behind them, the Confederation began the long process of adjusting to a galaxy that included humanity. Some would resent the change. Others would embrace it. All of them would remember this day, when a single human diplomat faced down the most powerful alliance in known space and didn't blink. In the archives aboard 1,000 human ships, history remained. The wars and the atrocities and the slow climb towards something better. Future generations would walk through those archives and understand what their ancestors had been, and what they had chosen to become. The wolves still lived inside them. They always would. But for now, the right one was being fed, and that would have to be enough.